Okay, now we're going to start Unit 3. We're at 3.1, and before we do that, we're just going to kind of backtrack a little bit, kind of review and get us caught up to where we are in our story. We started with the unit Natural Texas and its people, and it just we talked about how the early people who migrated into North America from Asia, they were nomadic hunters following herds of animals. And about 100 BC, about 2100 years ago, they began to develop farming techniques and domesticating plant species for cultivation. And because of that, they were able to stay in one place and develop more complex societies. And then we sped up all the way to the age of contact, which was the mainly Spanish, but also French explorers that came into contact with this area. They were looking for gold, God, and glory. We talked about different explorers. Pineda mapped the coastline. Cabeza de Vaca gave the first real eyewitness account of the interior of Texas. And Rene de la Salle established a failed French colony close to the Texas coast after he shipwrecked as well. So now we're up to the Spanish colonial era. Okay, Spain has begun to try to colonize the area and to make it an extension of their empire. So after the French established Fort St. Louis, up until that point, Spain had not really expended any resources hardly into the area. Once they realized that there really wasn't any gold to be had, they didn't want to waste money or resources on the area. And so because there wasn't any type of external threat, there wasn't any need to defend it. But once the French arrived, the Spanish became very paranoid about somebody taking the land from them. So they began to establish little colonies and missions and whatnot in the area. So missions and presidios, okay, they basically went hand in hand, okay, as a way of really claiming the land and making it their own. They decided that what they needed to do was, in order to have an empire, you needed to have subjects that were loyal to you. And so they figured that the way that they could have the people that lived here, the Native Americans, loyal to Spain was to convert them to Catholicism and to also teach them Spanish culture and Spanish ways, like Western European Spanish ways of doing things. And so that's what the missions were for, to convert the Native Americans and to kind of, Christianize and Westernize them, and hopefully in the hopes that they would become loyal subjects to the Spanish crown. And so, but also because they weren't necessarily friendly tribes, they also established presidios with soldiers in order to help protect the friars and the missions. The missions were run by friars, and to protect them from attack from perhaps hostile tribes, they established presidios, or basically military forts nearby that housed the soldiers needed to protect them. And so the mission presidio system, it was a way of solidifying control over the territory by transforming them into Christians and loyal subjects. And it worked well in Mexico. They had done the same thing among the Aztecs, and it had worked very well. And so it had enabled them to really entrench Spanish culture into the area in Mexico. And they hoped that they could easily do the same thing in Texas. And so they took a mission, they built a presidio, and they hoped to, establish control over an area each time that they did that. And there's a little picture of another old Spanish mission in Texas. So the questions here: what were missions and what was their purpose? Easily put. Missions were a church in a little community. Usually they had barracks for people to live in, and they had chapels, they had churches, sanctuaries, and where they did religious teachings, and they basically taught the Native Americans, Spanish culture, and Spanish religion. What were presidios and their purpose? The presidios were essentially a military fort, and their purpose was to protect the mission and the Catholic friars and priests that served there. So the first mission that we want to talk about is Corpus Christi de la Isleta, and it was the first Spanish mission built in Texas, and it was built near present-day El Paso in 1682. And this was 3 years before LaSalle landed on the coast in Texas. So they started to kind of move into Texas just a little bit, but not too far, kind of easing, gradually encompassing more territory. So this was right outside El Paso. And there we go. So what was the first mission built in East Texas, or built in Texas? I'm sorry. It was Corpus Christi de la Isleta. And that first mission's location was near modern-day El Paso. The next one, that noteworthy one we want to talk about, is San Francisco de los Tejas. And so in 1690, the first mission built in East Texas was established by Damian Massanet, a Spanish friar. It was called San Francisco de los Tejas. Tejas is a word meaning friend in the Caddo language. That was the local tribe in the area where they built it, the Caddo. And they even built other missions very soon after in East Texas, but eventually they all fell by the wayside and were abandoned as the native tribes rejected Spanish religion and culture. And the first capital of Texas was also established around this time of the territory of Texas. It was called Los Ares, and it was in present-day Louisiana, just across the current border between Texas and Louisiana. So here's our map. We have San Francisco de los Tejas. It was sort of near Nacogdoches, current-day Nacogdoches, and Los Ares is across the border, a little bit south of Shreveport, modern-day Shreveport, Louisiana. So the first mission built in East Texas was San Francisco de los Tejas. Why were so many of the missions eventually abandoned? They were abandoned because the native Texans rejected Spanish culture and Spanish religion. And that is all that we have for today. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow.